To our PMQs panel. That was a very lively session, plenty of meat there. We've got a new Brexit acronym. Do we dump it or keep it? Smexit, introduced by Claire Perry, the former rail minister. That stands for Smooth and Smart Brexit. We can get into that and see if that's got any legs. Obviously, lots of talk too about social care and about wages after quite a difficult autumn statement for Theresa May and her Chancellor Philip Hammond, and the SNP bringing up the issue of Aleppo and the terrible humanitarian disaster still unfolding there. So with me, I'm delighted to welcome Mims Davis, Conservative MP for Eastleigh. We're joined by Dawn Butler. She's the Labour MP for Brent Central and the Shadow Minister for Women and Equalities. Welcome to you both. And Neil Gray, he's the SNP spokesman on Fair Work and Employment and MP for Airdrie and Shotts. Have I said that correctly?
Absolutely.
Good, yes. Good. OK, well, let's kick off, I think, with Smexit. Because I just feel like we need to have a discussion on whether this should stay and go a smooth and smart Brexit. Well, clearly, it hasn't felt like a smooth and smart Brexit this week. We've had the issue of the memo that we all saw where the first Brexit plans potentially revealed on the back of someone's notepad rather than in the House of Commons. And then the issue in the past few days about reciprocal rights and whether Theresa May can get an early deal with her EU colleagues to ensure that UK citizens can stay in the EU and EU citizens can stay here. Let's kick off with you, Mims. Smexit, do you think your PM has a hope in hell of getting one?
Well, Claire Perry obviously came up with smart and smooth Brexit, which frankly I prefer the sound of, and I'm sure our Prime Minister might agree with that one. We heard that obviously Article 50 and the timing of that's really, really important, but this is the issue which is hot today, and for people living and working across the EU, this needs to be dealt with. It was always going to be the issue that needs to be managed, and I'm delighted to hear from the Prime Minister once again today that that is the first thing that she wants to get sorted. We heard from Peter Lilly, EU process is more important once again to the EU than humanity, to people's jobs and working lives, and frankly that is wrong.
And actually, you brought up that Peter Lilly grab, so should we try and throw to that? This is what Peter Lilly had to say. He's a massive Eurosceptic Conservative MP. Let's have a listen to that exchange in the Commons.
I welcome my right honourable friend's eagerness to give EU citizens living and working lawfully in this country the assurance that they'll be able to remain here after Brexit and to obtain similar reassurances for British citizens living and working in the EU. Does she therefore share my disappointment that Mr Juncker, in response to a letter from 80 members of this House to resolve this issue speedily, has intransigently put EU processes ahead of common humanity?
Well, I'm sure my right honourable friend, as I've said earlier, that I would hope that this is an issue that we can look at an early stage of the negotiations. Of course, there will be 2 years of the negotiations. I think it is right that we want to give reassurance to British citizens living in the EU and to EU citizens living here in the UK.
Dawn, I'll come to you. Obviously, Theresa May, after the Brexit decision, the EU referendum, said that she couldn't guarantee the rights of EU citizens living here. And she said she couldn't because she couldn't do it without a reciprocal deal. She's now saying that she would like the EU to go ahead with that, despite not being willing to trigger Article 50 towards the end of March. Who do you have sympathy with, Donald Tusk or Theresa May?
Well, to be honest, I just wish that Theresa May would decide where she's going to come from and help us understand the plan and the direction. Because at the moment, all we're doing is kind of guessing, scrabbling around, looking at people's notes written on the back of a fag packet and thinking, well, that's the plan. You know, and is the plan having your cake and eating it? Or is the plan, of course, we want this reciprocal arrangement, and that's what she should aim for and deliver. But what else is she aiming for in the plan to exit the European Union? That's important. It's important for business and it's important for the country.
And Neil, what do you think? Do you think that that the EU's wrong on this matter, that they should offer up these reciprocal rights? I know the PM is trying to get this nailed down for the European Council in December. What should the EU leaders just tell her to get lost?
I'm not surprised at the response from the European Union, because this became a negotiating position because of the response that Theresa May took to the calls that we made, that other opposition parties made, and some Conservative members now have made, to say that the right to remain for EU citizens living and working here in the United Kingdom should be protected. So, quite frankly, I'm not surprised, and she's going to have a long and hard negotiation on this front, but what could have been resolved so early on in this process.
How would you have seen it resolved then?
By saying right at the start that EU citizens living and working here who contribute to our society and contribute so positively to our society can remain here. No ifs, no buts.
But that would have removed a negotiating card from her hand. Do you think she should have...
It's only become a negotiating position because of her response at the outset. And that is why she finds herself in the difficulty she does. And it just sums up and personifies the haphazard approach that this government has taken to this problem, this issue of exiting the European Union.
Doesn't it personify the way that the EU deals with matters when it comes to people's jobs and livelihoods, where the protecting EU process is more important? Isn't this posturing ahead of the meeting?
No, it isn't.
Well,
that's not how you negotiate.
So Mims thinks that institutionally the EU have been intransigent because of their own political demands. What's your view? You don't agree?
No, I don't agree. I agree with it. We should have had a plan, and it should have been no ifs and buts. This is what we want, and then there's going to be so much more to negotiate. It's such a complicated process. This is actually, in the scheme of things, something that should have just been done right from the beginning. This is where we stand. No ifs, no buts. There's a lot more to be done. You know, we've got all the trade agreements, we've got the customs union. There's so much more to be negotiated. You know, I just feel that we're going to be tied up in knots for more than 2 years if we don't get this sorted right away.
And Beth, you know, if the government had a plan at any stage during this referendum, you know, in Scotland, the Scottish independence referendum, there's a 700-page document produced beforehand. Now, whether you agreed with it or not, it was there for people to see what would happen afterwards. And there is nothing from this government, not a side of A4 on what it's going to do.
Well, there is a side of A4. It's just from an aide rather than a minister. We're going to have to move on, but quickly, I want an out of 10 for the probability of a Smexit. Mims, Smexit, out of 10?
I think Claire is wonderful. I'm not comfortable with that phrase. I think the Prime Minister has looked for making Brexit a success. I prefer that one. I don't even like Brexit, to be honest.
No, it just makes me think of Theresa May sitting in the corner frothing at the mouth.
OK.
I don't like it as a phrase, and I don't think
you don't like it?
No.
OK, we're ditching it.
So I think it was what needs to happen.
Look, the other huge issue, and the issue that kept coming back in the chamber, is the issue of both social care and wages. We've got a couple of clips. The first thing, Dawn, I'll come to you, is Jeremy Corbyn had a very good point in the chamber about the IFS report saying there's going to be the worst wage performance in 70 years in the current decade, dismal for people already struggling. But he seemed to mess it up by mixing up his institutions, mixing up the IMF for the IFS. Let's have a listen to that grab.
Since she quotes the Institute of Fiscal Studies, I think she's been a little bit selective, because they also went on to say that the prospect for workers over the next 6 years was, and I quote, dreadful, and went on to say, creating, and I quote, the worst decade for living standards since the last war, and probably since the 1920s. Isn't it fair to say that those just getting by are suffering all the pain for no gain?
Prime Minister!
I have to say to the right honourable gentleman, I think given that he can't differentiate between the IMF and the IFS, it's probably a good job he's sitting there and I'm standing here.
How frustrating is that for you? Because actually the point was excellent, totally lost because he mixed up the acronym, giving Theresa May such an easy way of batting off the question.
Yeah, but ultimately, she should have answered the question. The thing is that the report has come out that's been written by the Runnymede and the Women's Budget Group talking about the autumn statement. And so, yeah, Jeremy might have fluffed his words a little bit, but ultimately, what this report has said is that women suffer the brunt of these Conservative cuts, and Black and Asian women suffer more than any other group. And Theresa May knows this is a problem because she stood on the steps of Number 10 and she said that if you're born poor, you will die 9 years earlier than any other group, and yet still she's presiding over policies that are making people poorer in society. That's what's important.
And you can make that argument, but Mims, do you think that that totally gets neutered when Jeremy Corbyn can't deliver the line?
Yeah, and one of the things we were discussing earlier is that PMQs is so much longer now because it takes him so long to get to the point. We have got a fantastic growing economy, the fastest growing economy with 2.1% according to the OBR. We've got unemployment at an 11-year low. We have got some really good stories to tell. We've taken 4 million people out of income tax altogether, and by next April, 31 million people have had an income tax cut. The government can't pull every string, and this was the first autumn statement in a new style of dealing with matters, and I heard that from the Chancellor very loud and clear, this kind of tinkering around the edges.
Guys,
and if we want to come back to Dawn's point of really changing things for people and being more equal, I think we need to be much more long-term about it.
No, Dawn, because we're not going to get the next clip. It's really important for Labour, which is social care. The PM, I will bring you in on wage growth and social care. Let's listen to what the PM said on social care. A difficult subject for her in PMQs.
Could the Prime Minister explain to the more than 1 million elderly people not getting the care they need, to the 4 million on NHS waiting lists, to the millions of pensioners worried about losing the protection of the triple lock, why there is not 1 penny extra for the NHS or social care? Just what is this government's real sense of priorities?
Prime Minister!
The right honourable gentleman talks about funding social care and funding the National Health Service. £3.8 billion extra is going into the National Health Service this year. Under Labour's plans, we would have seen £1.3 billion less going into the National Health Service.
Well, she talks tough there, Neil, but clearly the government has a massive issue on NHS funding and social care. Do you think that this is going to potentially unravel for them in the next few months?
Well, I expect so, particularly if the Leader of the Opposition presses in a style and a way that is effective. And it was a mistake for the Chancellor not to mention the NHS, not to mention social care. And in Scotland, we are integrating health and social care to bring about the best possible service to patients in Scotland. But going back to wages, you know, wages hit a peak in 2009 and it has fallen away, stagnated since then. We are seeing the slowest wage growth since the Napoleonic Wars, and the government is just simply not acting. It's conflating a national living wage, which is not national, it's not a living wage, and sabotaging a very, very good campaign, which is not bringing about the results that it should.
And Mims, just on social care, obviously Stephen Dorrell, former Health Secretary, former Chair of the Health Select Committee, Sarah Wollaston, everyone, people on your benches even, are now saying, look, you need to look at this again. Jeremy Hunt saying, actually, earlier in this week, that he was listening. Do you think your government is going to move on this?
Yeah, so there's a bed blocking issue, we know, and that affects the NHS. The more money we pour into it, it's a big problem with 1 million people more over 65 to look after. But we've also got an army of carers out there, 6.5 million people who are caring for loved ones day in, day out. In the devolution round, which we're looking in Hampshire, we're looking at an integrated opportunity. So I think there's a good opportunity there. I'm on this carers strategy. I'm listening, and I'm really delighted to be feeding into that because I've been a carer as well.
Dawn, you've got 10 seconds.
This government's all about PR. They've made £4.5 billion worth of cuts in the NHS. They're doing a new plan. They've taken £22 million out of the NHS already, and it's all about PR. It's not about the reality. Ambulances are not making it to destinations on time because they're having to wait in the A&E, which this government is cutting.
OK, well, thank you all for joining me. Plenty to talk about. We didn't even get to Aleppo and Angus Robertson's question. Theresa May got big issues here on Brexit and social care. And remember, we're going into winter, and that's a real weak point for the NHS. But thanks for joining us. Thank you all. Hope you enjoyed it. I did. Back to you.
We enjoyed it too, Beth.